and it's another episode of Summits with a Purpose in conversation with Sibusiso Vilane, the one and only. Before I get to Sibusiso Vilane, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Today was full of drama. I was waiting for this interview and suddenly, whoops, I don't know whether it's load shedding or what's happening in the West Strand. I had no lights. And I decided this interview was so important, and based on the fact that we promised we will make a plan, and Sibusiso and I are here to actually share a lot of what he knows and a lot of what he's gone through so that we can learn from him. And if you tune in, please send through the questions and let's do this. We've, again, just to recap, gone from Nepal, talking to Dr. Nima, Basam, Mandy Lee. We've talked to Kathy and many others. And today we are back home to the first Black man to summit Everest. Sibusiso Vilane, thank you so much, Budi, for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Sarah. Thank you very much to you and whoever is listening and watching. We are grateful. We appreciate the opportunity. And thank you for having us.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about you. Where did you start? I know many people have heard your story. You've told it many times, but just a little bit of a brief of where you started and where you're at for now.
I don't know how much of it they want. It can't be very brief. But in short, I started as a non-mountaineer, non-hiker because I grew up in very rural South Africa and very desperate to just make ends meet. And I was brought up by an illiterate mum and me and my sister. So she would find it very difficult to really get us to even to school. So all her efforts were channeled around us having a meal at the end of the day. But I was very lucky that when I was 9, she had met a wonderful man who became my stepdad, who then at the age of 10 allowed me an opportunity to go to school. And that was the beginning of my life, really, because he had given me a base, which I value so much, being education. With that base, I appreciated that opportunity, and I went to high school. And when I was at high school, I was helped by a Canadian couple throughout to all level of education, because that's the highest level of education I have, which I got and I still have today. So straight from school, I went to a working environment. I couldn't have any time to go to college or university. And the reason I opted to go to work was because I didn't have a very stable home. My mother was renting a little apartment in a township, and I wasn't too happy about that. So I needed to find myself a job. And I moonlighted into a construction company where I spent about 2 fought 2 years, really earning pretty much nothing. But I knew that in some way or the other, there was something better out there. I didn't know what it was. So I just took chances and wrote to organizations. And one day I was given an opportunity for a job interview in a nature reserve. And I went in with all confidence that I would probably pass the interview. And in that game reserve, I got the job and I worked there for 7 years. And it was only in my 3rd year that I would meet John Dobul, the man that probably shaped my life for what it is today when we talk Sibusiso, the mountaineer, because I had offered to take him on this little walk in the nature reserve. And before we knew it, we were talking why there are no Black mountaineers or people climbing big mountains coming from Africa. And he said, I've seen you today and I think you have such an ability. So I thought I would probably reply or answer like any other Black child would do. I said, well, what is it with mountains? Why people go to mountains? And I don't understand why they even go out for a little hike or something. But John then wasn't going to be fazed by my comment, because then he says, isn't it amazing that it is almost more than 40 years? This is now, we are speaking 1996 when I met John Dobul. More than 40 years since Hillary climbed Everest. I don't recall it having been climbed by an African, regardless of color. And for me, that was the starting point, because I had to remind myself where Everest was. I realized was overseas. And like any other Black child would think, you think anything overseas would be near impossible to afford. Given the chance, then I probably would do it. But as I was talking about this to John, then he surprised me by saying, let us say you had the means to climb Everest, would you do it? I'd never climbed a mountain. I'd never hiked. I'd never slept in a tent. I don't know how many out there listening right now coming from a background of myself where you walked barefooted without any clothes to wear up until the age of 10. How would you have answered if someone threw that question to you? Probably many of us would have thought, oh, well, not for me. Why do I want to do it? And no, I can't do it. But for me, it was immediately within seconds. I thought, well, if you say yes, he might probably help you to do it, because then I knew why I wanted to do it. And my why I wanted to do it was very simple. It was that day that I decided I want to do it for Africa. And then I said to him, absolutely, if I get a chance to climb Everest, I would do it. And then I must say to people that are listening and watching, I had no clue how high Mount Everest was. I'd never seen a picture. I'd never read a book. But as you said, in a nutshell, how did it all start and where I am? I've climbed Everest twice, been to the 7 summits, been to the North and the South Pole, ran many marathons and everything. But it only started with that man saying, if you could climb Everest, would you do it?
Wow, that's an amazing story. I know you've told me about it before, but every time I listen to it, it's humbling. It takes me back to a book that was just written by Lee Den Hon, which says that if you just say yes,
Oh yeah,
amazing. So it's been a long time. But how does it feel to be the first Black man to have summited Everest? How long did it take before it sunk in to say this has actually happened?
It only took a day of coming from the summit and landing at base camp, because when I summited, I never knew what has happened. I was still overcome by the emotions of it. So I met John in 1996, and then we become friends. We do a number of hikes in the Drakensberg. In 1999, he kindly sponsors me to go climb Kilimanjaro, simply because one of his friends was going to climb Kilimanjaro and John wasn't interested. So he says, I'll be happy to pay for you to do it. I summit Kilimanjaro in 1999, and it was just the perfect time of the day where you are standing on the highest point in Africa and you're watching the sunrise. At the back of my mind, when I saw that, I thought, well, if you get that chance to climb Everest, then you must do it. Because if this is what people see and they take, then it is worth taking the risk and going. But it will take us about 7 years, because John wasn't a climber himself. I wasn't a mountaineer myself. So we were both blank. We didn't really know where to start and how to go about it. Then he retired and went back to England. England being a climbing nation, he found a company in Sheffield that was going to lead Everest expeditions, and they were leading the 7 summits, but they were specifically going to plan an Everest expedition to climb in 2003, which was the 50th anniversary. And John writes a letter to me. We don't email even today. We write letters. Most people don't. I still go to my post office box and I open. I'm looking forward to an envelope with John's letter, not accounts or anything. And I read. So I read this letter, July 2002. John says to me, Sibusiso, I found a company in Sheffield. They lead expeditions everywhere, but specifically next year they are going to have an Everest expedition. I think this is a perfect idea for you to go and do it. And then he writes to me, I must say to people, he writes to me in black and white that it is such a dangerous undertaking. People die on that mountain. You can come back completely disfigured with injuries. So he painted the dangerous picture of it. And again, surely if you're an African child, you will say, then why do I even bother? It was then that comes to me to say, remember that the main reason you want to do it is just to showcase what you believe about Africa and Africans, that they can achieve great things. It doesn't matter in what sport or in what sphere of life. It can be life itself, adventure, mountaineer. We can achieve like anybody else does, but I wanted to go and prove this. Now, this brings in the question about being first. I didn't really have that much in my head because I was not a very a researched person. I didn't even go out to have a look as who's done what. But I knew that in this country, specifically South Africa, there'd never been any black person simply because of the background of the country. But I never thought that anyone from Africa has never done it, so I didn't really care. But I'm like, I'll go out there and just prove to my South African brothers and sisters that it can be done. So it meant a lot for me that I went. But when I arrive in Kathmandu, I meet this wonderful lady, the late Elizabeth Holy. She sits down with me and she says, well, Sibusiso, here's a point and a fact. If you summit Everest, you won't just be the first black South African or African to do it. You will be the first black person in the world to do it, because there's no other black person in the world that has ever summited a Himalayan mountain. And that was, for me, another added motivation to say, wow, it's time you go out there and prove it now, not to Africans, but to the world that it can be done. So when, after the 2 months that I was on the mountain and I found myself on the 26th of May, with that message that I've been carrying within me, that Africans can conquer like anyone. When I found myself standing, being the tallest person, short as I am today, on earth, it was a humbling feeling, and it just became too emotional for me. I remember I couldn't contain myself when I realized that, wow, it is true what you have been thinking and what you've been believing about yourself and about Africans and about people that have a will to do stuff that nothing can stop them but only themselves. And here you are, a proof to that. So that was ecstatic. I mean, you can never articulate it in words, but for me, that has all the meaning in the world. I didn't mind what else could happen to me. I just done it to show that we all are capable, but we've got to want to do it. So it was very, very important. I think I said, in fact, the feeling for me on the summit of that mountain was such that even if I just passed out and just died, I was just happy. Even though people say, well, if you die, then it doesn't count. You need to come down alive. So I'm like, okay. But for me, it was such a fulfillment that I didn't really mind what happens to me then, because I'd achieved what I'd set out to achieve.
Wow. Well done again. I know it's years later, but it is an amazing feeling. Like Utata said, it always seems impossible until it's done. So thank you for leading the way. So I've changed my interviews a little bit. I want to almost share people's worst moments so that others can learn from us, and also the most important moments as well, because I think, you know, when you go to Everest, especially when I tried the first time, you always think it's summit. You don't get to think about what if it goes wrong and how do I do this. It's something that I've had to learn with time. So I'll start with your worst moments, or moments that you reflect on and you think, oh my goodness, I wish that could have happened differently, but you learned from them. Can you share some of those moments, even if one or two, whatever you believe that the audience may learn from? Yeah.
Oh, look, it's a very valid comment or observation, because I think we all probably become so overwhelmed by what is in front of us that you sort of close your minds and your eyes around as to what is happening. For me, coming from my background, there were moments where I thought, you know, you do have this dream and this ambition to reach the summit of the mountain, but surely this is not just for an ordinary child. It is not for an ordinary African. And the reason around that was because I teamed up with 12 other people, and they came from Europe. You know, we were very diverse. I was the only African, and then most of them were from overseas. But you could just tell from the way they dressed. They were swimming in sponsorship logos and etc. and high tech gear and everything. And there I was with my basic African clothing, and the cold would just zip through to my bones. And it was during those moments that I found it really tough to cope with the environment I was at, because it was so tough in every word of it. But I think what made me to really be with them was knowing that, no, this is beyond my miseries. This is beyond the cold. This is beyond them wearing very high-tech gear and clothing. I have a dream and I have a goal that I want to achieve for my continent, and therefore stay the course. But it just exposed me to those conditions to say, you are a poor African child, and I don't know why you are here. And yeah, it was to linger with me for a long, long time. I would remember at one stage I would come to a tea house and they will either have a beer or something better, and I always had my little bottle of water. Even if I would have wanted a cold drink or something, I couldn't. I remember very well, the only little money I had in my pocket was what I was going to give to my shepherd guy as a thank you, and that was all. That's all that I had. And so all of those things came as low points, but at the same time as learning experiences that I would probably in the future try and come better prepared in both the technical clothing and have some pocket money really to entertain yourself whenever you feel like. But finding myself on the slopes of Everest with probably nothing, and yeah, no, that was tough.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the high points, and maybe experiences that you had that gave you an aha moment, a teaching moment where you learned something that's remained with you for the rest of your life.
It happens when I first ventured on the Kumbu icefall. I was with the expedition leader. I was very close to the expedition leader, Robert Anderson, a great leader on the mountain, and we had started, as you probably will know, that you always start at the crack of dawn to hit the Kumbu icefall, and it's when it is as the sun was just coming up to warm the Kumbu icefall. And I looked around and I was very impressed or interested in just admiring the formation of the Kumbu icefall. I never thought you would find big blocks of ice the size of buildings and then get told that they are moving. But I stood there and I was in awe of it all, and I was taking a picture, and somehow I made a comment which made Robert to respond and say, Sibusiso, you have got the right mind to be on this mountain. So I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? He says, most of the people, when they are in the middle of the Kumbu icefall, they dread it. They don't want to be there. They it is dangerous, but it just puts people off. But here you are, admiring it and liking it, and this is what it takes to get to the summit of a mountain. You need to have the right attitude, because it's the way you look at your surroundings that influences the decisions you made. And for me, that stayed profoundly, hearing it from him. And I wasn't aware that it was the attitude you need to project when you are in the midst of a rubble like the Kumbu icefall, because if you become negative about it, I think it impacts you much more. So that was one of the highest moments, to be able to hear from the expedition leader. In fact, if you look at it, I was the least experienced. I didn't have an experience at all in the team, but for him to give me that it just came as a compliment, and it was like, this is the person you want to lead your expeditions. It gave me all the confidence. And other than probably someone would have said, no, you need to get out of here, it's very dangerous, let's go. Why are you stopping taking a photograph? I think that would have definitely put me off or given me another different idea as to why I was on the mountain. But this was an empowering person, and his comments were so empowering for me that I really want to go higher than the Kumbu icefall. And then the second one was, it is very important to sit in a situation where it is very tough for you to be there, but when a friend of mine had come to cheer me up, and we never saw each other, and he had come with a message to say that some terrible thing had happened at home, and not like someone had died but someone decided to burn one of our houses at home. And John wanted to share this message, wanted to give me this message, but he couldn't, because he thought, there's no way I can tell someone else to send this message to him. So he kept quiet, and then he went away because we never saw each other. But he realized then that had he told me at that stage, maybe it would have influenced the summit and would have come up with a different results. But he thought, well, because no one has died, let me just keep it to myself. I will tell Sibusiso when he gets back to say, I wanted to tell you this anyway when I was at base camp, but I realized you were at the very awkward part of the mountain. I kept it to myself. And I thanked him for that because it was very thoughtful. I think someone would have just said, let's tell him. And I was sitting in a storm at Camp 2, probably would have been an easy answer to say, well, it's time you go home, and say it was the weather and someone has attacked your house. So why are you staying on the mountain? But it does help to not to know about what is happening in the outside world when you're in such places.
Yeah, that's so two things that I've taken from your last few comments. One is, when the world is shaking around us like we are at the moment with COVID-19, it's the attitude that we actually show up with that actually will help us go through this, which is important. And the other thing is, which people take for granted, which I've actually come to learn the hard way, is making a conscious decision about, what do I want to know while I'm on the expedition, and what do I not want to know? And actually preparing yourself to say, if this happens at home, don't tell me, which sometimes is actually not easy. It's easier said than done, but those are some of the difficult decisions that climbers actually have to deal with, unfortunately. So let's, talking about what's happening with COVID, I know you are part of the team that's going to walk through the Kruger. It's called #Warrior 500 to
500,
to try and raise 5 million rands. Tell us a little bit more about that, and why have you decided to join the war?
Look, first of all, it's very kind of Simone and Grant, who are already on day 3. Yes, when they started about 2 days ago. This is the 3rd day of walking. They still must be in the Kruger National Park. Those that have no idea what the Kruger National Park is, I'm sure there are people that are international that are listening or watching. It is one of South Africa's biggest national park. It's probably one of the biggest in the world, and it's a huge tourist attraction area. So you can imagine how devastated that area is with the pandemic in our midst, and the neighboring communities, which is a vast community of people who are probably being haunted by where do we get the next meal for the family. But Simone and Grant have come up with this adventure idea where they want to walk for 500 kilometers, raising about 5 million rands, which is a staggering amount of money when you think of it, but it is nothing compared to the needs of the people up there. So Grant invited me kindly to join them for a day or two of the walk. And then I accepted the challenge under these two premises. First of all, I'm a strong believer that you've got to be able to give, and you can't give what you don't have. Because the reason I'm saying that is because it would have been easy for me to say, okay, I will donate 100,000 to that because it's a cause I believe in, or 1 million, or give you the 5 million. But I don't have that. I need a food parcel myself, and everyone else has been talking about vulnerable people. In my case, we all are vulnerable at the moment. No one is pretty safe and secure. So we're all trying to survive it all. So I thought, well, what is it that I have that I can give? And I've got 2 things which I'm giving in support of this. I'm giving myself the time to be there, and then I'm giving my natural physical ability to walk for the 2 days with them. And that is all that I can just say, here you are, I know what you are trying to achieve, I'm with you, and I'm 100% supporting you, and therefore trying to call others while practically being there to say, here is an initiative that wants, I wouldn't say change lives, but we just want to be able to help someone that is being hard hit by the pandemic, as we all know at the moment. So it is, you can go to the website. It is very straightforward. As if you log onto the website, it says donate. You donate any amount, and we are hoping that by the time they are done, they would have hit or reached the target. Because here's a thing that I would like to maybe educate our brothers and sisters everywhere in the world. If you are a mountaineer and you are an adventurer who uses your name to raise awareness and funds, it becomes a little bit sad and disappointing when at the end of the expedition you haven't raised anything near what your target was. It becomes disappointing because surely for us, yes, we love the adventure, but the bigger purpose of it is why you are doing it for. If you don't achieve that for, then it becomes, I would say, it is not a successful expedition. They may get to 50 to 500 kilometers when they do it, but if they realize that all their physical efforts has amounted to nothing, they will be as disappointed as I will hugely be disappointed.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. And well done on joining them. I think it's a good cause. The tourism industry, guys, we all know it's been affected quite badly with the lockdowns. And I think what Simone and Grant are doing is actually very honorable. If you can help in any way, check it out. It's Warrior 500 and see how you can support. Send them a thumbs up or donate, whether it's time or just a little bit of sense where possible. So let me go back to you. I mean, since your first summit on Everest, you've done a few things apart from completing the Explorer Grand Slam, and you are one of only 67 people in the world. And I think the only Black people upstairs. What else have you done? I know you've guided and you've done other stuff locally and abroad. Do you get paid to guide?
It's an interesting question that, and one that I must answer, because people tend to think that you and I, who are mountaineers, and we post about being at these very remote places, and then we get paid for it. Particularly coming from an African background, I remember I still get that question even today. How much did you get from reaching the summit of Everest? When you tell them no, we had to pay 50,000 pounds to climb the mountain, but I wasn't paid. And then I would find others that would say, but why didn't you take that money and use it for your own good? Then I asked them the question, but who would give you that kind of money to use for your own good? We never get paid to do the things we do, the expeditions that we do, but we pay. But now coming on the leading or guiding part of it, I've been very lucky that through the experience I've gained, I get invited to lead people to your Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua in South America. Then they pay me. Only then they pay me. That's why then, if you are being locked down for the whole year, 4 expeditions that I would have led, that would have brought income to my family, are all out the window because they got cancelled immediately. But now, what have I done? I've done quite a lot. I wouldn't say I'm content with what I've done, but I'm very humbled when I look at it, that up until the age of 33, I'd never hiked, I'd never summited a mountain until John told me that you can do it. And I'm looking at what I've done since 2003 up until today. It's quite remarkable. But remarkable in the sense that I have summited Everest twice. The second was in 2005. And I must say again, for me, it wasn't purely because I wanted to do it by a different side. When I walked off the summit of Everest on my first summit in 2003, I made it a vow that I will never return to Everest. I will never go to any other mountain because of what I explained earlier, that it was so tough for me looking at how poor I was on the mountain and how long it took and all of those, realizing that I was just an ordinary African who would rather prefer to live in my warmest Africa than go to these places. So I didn't think I was going to have an interest in going back. But it was after 6 months of thinking about it and taking Nelson Mandela's words when I had the last chance opportunity to meet him. He said to me, Sibusiso, we are very proud of what you have achieved. You have shown the world that Africa is here, Africa is capable, and it stops the monopoly by the Westerners to think that they are the only ones who can attempt the near impossible and triumph. Your story says Africans can. And he said to me, you are an example, and I wish other Africans, specifically say children, would step up and follow in your footsteps. You have set a standard for Africa. So that challenged me in a sense, because it was a question of, if you set a standard, what do you do with it? For me, it was clear that you either uphold that standard, you maintain that standard. And him saying that we are looking up to you as an example, I realized that most Africans were looking to me, up to me as an inspiration, as they are looking up to you as an inspiration now, with all that you have done, talking about summiting Everest as well, being one of the things you've done. So Africa needs inspiration. I thought, well, then I would go out there and lead the way and be an inspirational leader to the many Africans that I can be. And I couldn't just do it with the one Everest. So I went and climbed it. The reason I went for the second time was to do it for charity, because I needed to find a much more deeper meaning. I realized that you can't just go and risk near dying on Everest, or freezing for 60 days on Everest, every night being a nightmare and every day an agony. Why would you want to do that? You've got to have something that is bigger than you, that is beyond you, that you are doing it for. Only then you get fulfillment at the end of it, after having endured all of it. So I realized I needed to go back, but the doing it for charity, I never understood about how can you do it. And then I met a person during my first climb who had done it, and she said, I'm also raising awareness and funds for charity. So I thought, what a brilliant idea. The next time I go to a mountain, I will do that. So that was the thing. You go climb Everest again, then decide to do it on a different route for charity. And that was the time that I started. Then that is the year where the 7 Summits idea came, because I had no interest in the 7 Summits up until after my second climb of Everest. And I thought, well, if you are constantly going to be inspiring Africans, you want to be on the road doing other mountains. So I gave myself 2 years to climb the 5 peaks that remained, because I had Kilimanjaro and Everest, and I'd been twice now on Everest. So I thought I would just give myself 2.5 years. I left my job, which was a big mistake, because I thought I would be. It will. I mean, I was very blasé, like anyone else would. I was like, you've got 2 successful summits of Mount Everest. I mean, who gets to do that? On your first attempt, you reach the top. Second attempt, you get to the top. Surely, someone will be very easy to want to sponsor another one of your expeditions. So I said, away with the job. Give yourself the time to end through inspirational speaking, and then you go climb mountains, because you get sponsorship. 2 years later, I was sitting at home without a sponsorship, and John just came back again and said, okay, I will have to help you through this project. So that was the mistake I made, because no one wanted to sponsor. It was only then that I realized that in Africa, there is no such thing as a professional mountaineer or professional adventurer. Forget about that. It will never happen. So anyone out there that thinks we get paid, we are not. Climb the 7 summits. I've climbed in the Alps, the mountains you can think of in the Alps, your Mont Blanc, your Matterhorn, the Eiger I have climbed, and then I came back to Africa as well, because as a continent with mountains to climb, we've got lots of adventure. Climbed Mount Kenya, climbed in the Rwenzoris. I have 5 mountains in the Himalayas that I've climbed, if I include Everest. So in a way or the other, I almost become a veteran mountaineer in the Himalayan mountaineer, but not. But as I was going around climbing, someone mentioned I had met a wonderful guy. I climbed with him on the north side. Ranulph Fiennes, most will know, he's British explorer. He's a living legend as we speak. He's done pretty much everything that's there to be done. Run 7 marathons in 7 continents. He's climbed the Eiger with vertigo, Everest summited, walked to the North Pole and South Pole. I met him and his wife in England, and his wife said to me, Sibusiso, you are young, you might want to do something else after Everest. I can highly recommend you do one of the polar expeditions that my Ranulph Fiennes has been on. And he's sitting there, and I'm looking at his digits. He's missing the top half of his fingers through frostbite that he suffered from Antarctica. Sitting there thinking, no, not a good idea. I don't think I would want to go there. But the seed had been planted, as they say, because spending time with him in 2005, I thought maybe then I want to do one of the polar walks. And then suddenly they said when he summited Everest, he was one of few people that have been able to stand on the summit of Everest, walk to the South Pole and to the North Pole, and that's called the Grand Slam of Adventure. So I thought, well, there's a chance opportunity there then just to go and lead the way and do those things and say, if any other human being can do it, so can I. And then I went. 2007, we started walking to the South Pole, but we made it tough for us. When I say we, I'm talking about another fellow South African mountaineer, Alex Harris. Tough in that we thought we want to start from the coast and do 10 degrees, not the last degree, which is the very last of it. We wanted to do a full on, and two people sledge hauling took us a grueling 65 days to do it. And then on the 17th of January, we found ourselves, 17th of January 2008, we were at the South Pole now with 2 poles done. I thought it became like logic, you've been to the South Pole and Everest, you might as well go north. So it was June 2012 that I completed the Grand Slam. And coming from the village where I come from, and looking back as that little young man who grew up barefooted, and I'm talking, you said I'm one of 68 that have done this, is quite humbling, and it is really remarkable and amazing. I'm very grateful to that one man being John, who has done all this and influenced me to think beyond my limitations, which is what we try and model and try and encourage when it comes to Africans, when it comes to Black people, that we can never limit ourselves, because I don't think that the sky is the limit. I think personally, I live by the fact that I am the limit. So if I don't limit myself, I can just go as beyond the sky. That's the message we want to give. In this country, I've run 10 comrades. So the Comrades Marathon, for people, it is the 90-kilometer 12-hour race you run, and we run it every year in the month of June. I've run 10 of those. It's gruesome, and it's one of the physically tormenting things I've ever done. But if people ask me what is the most physical thing I've done, it's something that you have done as well. I don't know if you were stretched to your physical limit. It is not Everest. It is not a mountain. It is not me pulling 140 kilogram sleds for 1,200 kilometers to the South Pole. It is walking up and down the Westcliff steps in Johannesburg for 34 hours. That for me is the thing that pushed me to my ultimate limits, physically and mentally. I was a walking zombie when I finished it. So it still stands, because I don't think of anything anywhere near as tough that I had to endure mentally and physically.
I agree with you, Ray. If you're listening, that was a bad idea. Good one.
Yeah, no.
As we were talking about the South Pole, one thing that I actually found it mentally challenging than Everest. The fact that you keep going and there's no point of reference. When you're on Everest, you say, okay, I'll get to Camp 1, or I'll get to that rock, or I'll get to that ice, and I've achieved something.
Yeah.
You keep skiing.
Not there.
And you look at the back, it looks exactly the same as it is in front. That got me. Anyway,
it is the most mentally tormenting thing, exactly for the same reason. The fact that you have got no reference, it's killing mentally. It's it's too monotonous, and to be able to do that in 65 days is insane. I accept that fact that we're all mad.
It's just the degree of madness. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I can see you guys are there. Simon, thank you so much for joining. Nontu, thank you. If you have any questions, please just put them in the chat box. I'll be able to send them through to Sibusiso, and then we can address them. Sibusiso, talking about a younger you, knowing what you know today, what would you tell a younger you? We do have some followers that are young, that may want to almost learn from maybe the mistakes or successes, almost like a shortcut to where you are at. What would you tell a young student?
Look, the A younger me, I would tell him that you never know what, never grow up thinking that the world is so small. The world is so vast, and all the opportunities out there are for all of us to really try and go out and pursue and achieve. Because we grow up in a very little community and area, and you think that is your world. The world is so big, and there's so much that you need to do. You can never limit yourself when it comes to exploring, because that's how you grow. Exploring does not mean you need to go overseas. You just need to start where you are and then go a little bit further than the community where you come from, because I'd never been given that opportunity, and as a result I thought my world was just this province, and that was it. And then if I went to Johannesburg, it was a nightmare. It was like I'd come from overseas, and it drove me mad. But knowing that it was the way I limited myself. So young me, I would say never limit yourself. Go out and explore, see the world. Yes, do get your best education as you possibly can, but the biggest way to learn is through exploration. It is through adventure, and through adventure you are able to identify with your limitations. You are able to identify with your strengths, which is what happened when I started hiking in the Drakensberg. I could tell personally that I'm physically fit and I can fight and I can get to the top of a peak when I want to do it. But it was being able to recognize with those, because when I went to climb Everest, then I didn't have any climbing experience, but because I knew that physically I'm capable, I can do this thing, I went. If I didn't know that I was physically able and capable to do it, it would probably have not happened. So if the younger you are, go out, explore, go out, challenge yourself physically, find out where is your strong point. Is it your physical ability or your mental strength? Because they will all help as you journey along in this journey of life, which we call adventure. It can never happen if you don't really know who you are and what makes you tick. But most of all, let's let Africans, young Africans, just feel proud to be an African. Know that you are unique as everyone, because I think when we are younger, we don't think that we are that unique. And that's probably why we end up looking at other people, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But you've got to accept the fact as who you are is who you are. And then you take that and then just appreciate that there is no one else on this planet Earth but you.
Yeah, yeah, I would second that. You touched on fitness, and I'd like to maybe share with our viewers your training regime. How do you prepare for an Everest, and how do you prepare for a polar expedition? I know that one will pull tires and stuff. How do you prepare for any one of those? And you can start with either when you either one of the two.
Yes, I will start. I will start with Everest, so that people understand. Because it's. I'm glad you asked the question, because it gets asked many times. Even when I do, whether it's a magazine interview, they still ask about the training. I get this letter from John, so I write to him and I say I want to do this, and the next I hear from him, we are near the end of the year, and then I have to quickly go to the Himalayas just to pass a test that I could do this, because the company wanted to meet me and talk to me just to understand how much I want this because of my lack of experience. So I came back and I was still a full-time game ranger. Now, game ranging means you work in the game park. I was guiding, like literally in the nature reserve, in the game reserve. So I couldn't go to train anywhere else other than in the game reserve. So Claire Kitten, who was there writing for the Sunday Times, wrote an article before I left and said training for Everest among lions. That's what I did, because I was running a little bit in the game reserve. But in the true sense of it, it was because of the timing of the opportunity and the time available for me and the finances available for me to go and do this. We never had time to go and train anywhere. But ideally, you will have to train on a mountain. You will have to physically go and climb mountains higher than your Kilimanjaro, because I think we make a mistake and think we've summited a Kilimanjaro, therefore I'm a mountaineer or I'm a climber. No, that's a good start, but you need to gradually go higher than a Kilimanjaro to a 7,000 meter peak, to an 8,000 meter peak. Just have a feel of how your body cope with such altitudes and the conditions, be it the cold, etc. See all the things that happens. I was very lucky that in the 30 days I went to the Himalayas, I saw everything. I was sleeping when the tent was -15 and -20. I saw people being evacuated because they had high altitude sickness. One of the guys, not from my team, went over a cliff and we were never to see him again. So I saw everything. It was packed right there. That's the reason you need to go and do these things and experience those things so that you know when you decide you want to go, you know what is out there and what could happen. So that's very important. But for physically, I'd always run as a hobby, and that's my only form of exercise. I will never go to the gym if I don't have to, not unless someone brings a program, which I always question. They bring a program where I've got to go to the gym. I said, do I really have to do this? But only then. But other than that, I run. I believe in my physical fitness, and running is my way. It is my thing. So that's how I trained. I ran when I trained for Everest. So technically, people say, but how about the technical skills? I didn't have time to do that. I had to learn as I go. In fact, I still share with people that I sat in my little tent alone, which was good because at base camp I was alone with my big bag, which I'd hired all the staff, and I didn't know what was what. They were talking about the carabiner and the Juma I'd seen on the list, but I didn't know what was in the bag because we'd hired all the climbing equipment. And when I opened it, there was a wake up moment because I was like, I don't know what is this. And if my harness would twist, I would just leave it as it is and then try and figure out it will take me ages. So my harness was never undone until after the summit, because I knew if I did that, I would never be able to put it back on again. So I needed to do a little adjustment here and there. I was learning as I was climbing, so that was my good thing about it. I knew physically I'm strong, therefore I would just watch the guy in front of me, what he's doing and where. So that is my Everest climb the first time. Second time I went, not technical training or climbing anywhere, just trained physically by running. But a polar expedition and a mountaineering expedition, the training is very different because these are two different events or activities. Mountaineering, you are dealing with high altitude and your technical climbing skills. When you are polar traveling, you are physically exerting energy every minute of it. You're pulling 145 kilograms lead, as I was saying. So the training was such. I ran. Alex was a cyclist, so we had to cross train. A lot of cross training helps a lot as well because I think it keeps you going. You don't want it to be monotonous, and when you train, you vary your exercises. But we would pull the tires. We mountain biked, and then my biggest was the running. I refused to go to the gym with him because what made me to refuse to go to the gym again was we needed to put on weight and gain weight. And every time we stood on the scale, I was still weighing a scruffy 65 kilograms, and Alex was weighing 90 kilograms. He was gaining weight every day. I wasn't, purely because I run and he doesn't run. So we were at loggerheads. I'm like, okay, it's okay. I will start like this, but that's what we did. But the biggest training for us was the tire pulling, and it was in around Johannesburg. I still laugh about it because the first few days we did nearby we were at Orange Grove. There was a big golf course in the area, and there were these two people dragging tires, a black guy and a white guy, and you will see people watching us and no one will comment. And I always thought, I wonder if it was two black guys pulling tires around this suburb, surely a police van would have pulled through to say, hey, what's going on? But because there was a little bit of a puzzle, a white guy and a black guy, what are they up to? Luckily the local newspapers wrote to, I came to write an article, and then only then did we see, hey, when are you going? Hey, we wish you good luck and all of that. But it was a bit of a puzzle because nobody had an idea why we're pulling tires in the middle of Johannesburg. So, but that was that. We spent about 3 months, and that was very critical because we were going to be out in the frozen desert for that long.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think I've pulled tires a bit, and I think my neighbors just think this woman is a bit crazy. Unfortunately, I pull them on. There's one topic that everybody talks about, writes about, but sometimes it's very difficult. I mean, you go to the mountain knowing that there are people that have died on that mountain. But actually seeing people, for me, the first time was when I was with you in 2014. And I just want you maybe to share some of the any near-death experiences maybe that you've had yourself, or what you've seen and what you took from that.
It is a very tough one for a mountaineer, particularly for the newcomers, the aspirant mountaineers, some of which will find themselves on the mountain or in the situation without being fully aware that these things happen. It's a different thing to read about these deaths and these accidents, but it's a different thing when you see it with your eyes, or maybe if you are very unlucky or unfortunate, having one of your teammates probably dying right there in front of you. When I first saw it, it just made me realize the reality of it all. And it made me realize that I wasn't immune to it, because when I found the guy, I had met at base camp, shook hands with him, chatted a little bit, him wanting to find out where I was from and him telling me where he was from. But about a week, because they were a week ahead in the schedule, there he was lying dead. The challenging part for me was he was on the same rope I was clipped on, thinking that I was safe on it. But now here's a person that is dead on the same rope that you think you're safe on it. And how do you go about that anyway? So it was very tough to say it. But at that moment, I realized that, you know what, you don't know how he's died. You don't know what you are going to do not to die. It might be you. And then it sort of humbled me to just pray and hope for the best, and just unclip and pass and clip on the other side, saying, dear God, I pray for protection from here. But it is very tough when a climber experiences that, when he sees that. But when you look at it, we then accept that, you know what, it was their time, because if it is my time, I might go as well. And in fact, I'm well read when it comes to books. I've never, except Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, some of the yesteryear well-known mountaineers, most of them have died on the mountain. That's probably what, like, people would say, that's what happens to soldiers when they die in war, because that's what we do. We love mountains, and mountains take us. And we don't focus on the deaths and the accidents on the mountains, because I think it's bad luck that if an accident happens, in most cases, mountains are okay. We become the enemy when we go to them, because we're intruding into a space. And for us who go there, we need to pay all the respect they deserve, and then just humble ourselves that we will do our best as possible. And then if an accident happens, it is an accident. But we shouldn't go to mountains with the I'm going to run up a mountain, because they've got the energy to either make or break you. And I've seen that to a number of climbers, which it shouldn't be ideal. Just humble yourself and then go, and the mountain will repay you. That's why we don't conquer them, we conquer our own limitations and mistakes.
Yeah. Interesting. We are almost out of time, and I'm looking at no questions yet. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you so much for that comment. He says he likes your story about a black man and a white man pulling tires on the street. Anyway, so just to go back to your attempt without oxygen, can you tell us a little bit more that. I don't think that I've read any detailed account of that. What are the main lessons that you picked up from that you are comfortable to share? And what did you go through? That's something that you want to do again.
Sure. The no ocean attempt came as a matter of curiosity. I think curiosity is what sends us to these mountains. If people asked why you go, it's because you're curious. You are very curious to know how high and how far you can go, and then you go. But many years ago, even on my very first one, I had entertained this notion of like go without oxygen because I just dreaded the thought of carrying oxygen. When I was told I was going to carry oxygen, I was like, how do you do that? I wasn't prepared to do it. So, but then obviously companies say no, but then if you're climbing with us, you've got to use oxygen, which I did. But somehow when I walked down, I ran out of oxygen from above 8,000 meters. And personally, I didn't feel that I was dying. It took me a hell of a long time to climb down to the safety of the camp. But in 2005, I ran out of oxygen again at about 8.6, 8.7. And if you read about all the accidents that happened, it's mainly people that have run out of oxygen who died. But I didn't even, well, it was an epic. I had to survive. I had to fight my way through, which was near death because I'd been left by my teammates. So I fought through that. But those two challenged me to say, if you were able to cope above 8,000 meters, the dead zone, how far and how high can you go without oxygen? And one day my mind says, Sibusiso, you realize that you will never know until you do it. And that's when I committed. When I went with you in 2014, that was my plan. But again, we had the unfortunate incident which had me stalled for a couple of years. And then I went a year before last to attempt this. And the whole idea wasn't to summit, because people, they must understand, I wasn't there to summit at all cost. I needed to go there to see how far naturally a Sibusiso Vilane could go. And I made a point that if I get to a stage where I've got to use oxygen, even if it was within 200 meters before the summit, there was no way I would put on oxygen and climb to the summit. I would just go back down. That was my decision. So what I learned was, what went through my mind is I had done so well with the acclimatization, and I felt very strong up until the time when we got the call to go for a summit attempt. So we were sitting at Namche Bazaar. We flew back up to base camp, and I landed at base camp. I pick up the worst Kumbu cough. In fact, it was near full-blown lung infection. But I checked with the medical doctor. He said, you can still go. So he cleared me. I climbed up to Camp 2, feeling very strong. All my teammates from Camp 2 are using oxygen. I climbed to Camp 3. I was with them all the way to Camp 3. I'm feeling good. But the next day when we were climbing up to Camp 4, now into the dead zone, I made a mistake by starting with them. I should have given myself an hour or two head start, because before I knew it, there was me again above the Lotso phase up to the yellow band on my own. And it took me about twice the time it took them to get to Camp 4. I realized I was very slow, but the implication of being slow and starting late was I arrived quite late at Camp 4. I couldn't have enough time to rest, but then I needed to think very wise about it, and I needed to make a very conscious decision, a decision that was between life and death. And that decision was either you go down and leave, or you go up and climb, or come back in a goodie bag. And I refused to come back down in a goodie bag. So I said to my climbing Sherpa, when the others go tomorrow morning, you and I are going down. And I made that call and that decision then. It was the best decision I've ever made, but it was through my experiences of the past. I knew I can't take a risk when I wasn't feeling well, and I'm happy I took that decision. So I got to 8,000 meters, and I'm still very proud to have gone that far. I would have wanted to go higher than that, but at the moment, I'm still at 8,000 meters. We'll see one day, maybe. It's a maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why they say summit fever is not good for anybody. Thank you so much. Hello, Manisha. Manisha is saying hello. He says, how are you doing? Very inspiring. And
very strong. Thank you, Manisha.
And Simon is asking, what is your next climb? or what is your next adventure? What can we look forward to after the lockdown and everything else calms down? What is Sibusiso going to be up to?
It's a very good question, because it's one that I've been pondering about since the lockdown, and since income is closed, and since I said in the beginning that there is no such thing as an adventure, professional adventurer in Africa. I mean, for years now, I've been struggling to get funding, so I don't think I have any major or big things in the years to come. I will probably still lead or guide expeditions in around Africa, and just run or hike a little bit. Nothing major at the moment, because the biggest determinant of my expeditions is where to get the millions of rands to sponsor, not when corporate South Africa says what's in it for us if we pay $50,000 for you to climb a big mountain. I can't answer that question. I haven't been able to answer it for the last 10 years. So I don't think there's any major expedition that will happen, not unless by the grace of God I meet another John who will say, if you have a big mountain to climb, I'll be happy to support you and sponsor you. Then I will go, because I have lots of ideas, but they might remain just like that, dreams, as they say.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's an hour now, which is what normally I promise people we do this for an hour. Is there any last words that you have for people? I think apart from the hashtag Warrior 500, what would you like to leave with the people that are listening to us now and the people that will be listening after the replay?
To everyone that's listening, Doctor, thank you again for engaging with us in your platform. I appreciate that, and well done to you, to all that you have done, Everest. And the fact that you'll also be part of the Warrior 500 walk is quite incredible. But as we say, we do those things by being active and physically, and we give people what we can give. So yeah, I'm sure it's a pity that we won't, because they won't allow us to be together because of space and things. But yeah, I'm sure you're going to have a good time. To anyone that we thank everyone that has been listening, and someone that will still be listening or watching later, we thank you for your time to listen to us. I hope that you feel inspired to go. But here's one thing: we are facing a serious pandemic. It is purely our attitudes, how we behave, how we respond to the situation that will make us come to the other side safe and ready to go and climb mountains. So whenever you are doing whatever you are doing, let's not be selfish about it. This is a very serious situation, but you know what? It all shall pass, and then we can never lose the hope. We can never lose the dreams. Let us keep them, but let us just refocus our minds and just keep on thinking about why do you do what you do every time you do it. Is it protecting the other person next to you, or is it being selfish about it? If you have got to put on a mask, wash, sanitize, and just social distance. This will go, but we can never be complacent about it. We need to be serious. And we love you all. Let us go out there and explore and adventure, because the sky is never the limit. We are the limit. So don't limit yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you. Kind words. I'm not even going to add that to that. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for following. And thank you, Sibusiso, for leading the way. Always a pleasure. God bless. Stepping.
Thank you very much indeed. God bless.